Welcome. Thanks for coming along tonight. We've got a special guest speaker, Mr. Mark Batelik from Solutions Empowerment. And Mark's going to be covering taxation and not just minimizing taxation, but how to actually legally and morally keep all that you earn, whether you're an employee or if you run your own business. The other thing he's going to cover is some details about local councils and what to do if they're imposing fees, fines, and other things on you, and how to morally not pay those and how to relinquish that. So there's a couple of processes that you can learn there as well. So he's going to be touching on those and letting you know where you can learn more. Also, what we're going to do towards, once we're finished with that section, is going to show you some slides on a very special offer that's Mark has put together for you guys here tonight, just to save you guys some money if you actually want to partake in some of the education. So it'll take about probably 10 to 15 minutes to go through. And straight after that, we're going to go straight into Q&A from you guys. So you got questions you'd like answers to, we'll open up the chat line. You just type your questions in the chat. You can start typing now if you like, if you have any questions. And what we'll do is just read those out at the end and have Mark answer them for you. So with that being said, I'd like to hand it over to you, Mark, if we could just dive right in the deep end and let's get started.
Great. So Mark and I discussed that we'd cover just maybe a couple of, an overview of a couple of our subject matters, and we have about 90 now on our website. But some big ones are tax is always a very popular issue for many people, and the other one is councils. They seem to be invasive and invading into more people's lives all the time, and wanting more of the productivity of labor of people. So we'll talk about those two areas. And tax is a very, very easy one to deal with, believe it or not. I know many people are scared of the tax office. There's no justifiable reason for that. So there are two elements for the tax. That is, if there's already an outstanding account arisen, you put your returns in and what's come back is a big fat bill to pay, then we'll teach you how to deal with that quickly. And the other one is how to put your returns in the correct manner so that what comes back is an assessment for zero tax to pay. Unless, of course, you're a PAYE or G where you want to recover what has been withheld by your employer, and that's also achievable. So I'll go with the first one first, that there is already a tax liability, and there are many, many ways of dealing with it. You might have put your tax return in, and we only incriminate ourselves by doing so. But because tax is a voluntary compliance system, it's a federal voluntary compliance system. It's there in the Taxpayers Charter, which is a tax office document. This is for Australia I'm talking about now, and you can download it still from the tax office website. It's their code of conduct, essentially. Their Achilles heel, if you like, one of many Achilles heels that we use. But in there it says that the federal taxation system is a voluntary compliance system, so they can't force you to pay tax. However, because on the tax return, it gives you a way out. It says, are you going to put a return in next year? Yes, no, or don't know. If you tick yes, you have obligated yourself under contractual principles to put a return in the following year. If you've ticked the no box, you are no longer under contractual obligations to pay tax or to put a return in, and you're free, and they can't come and get you because it's a voluntary compliance system. Knowing that should give you a lot of peace. Now, if you're a contractor or self-employed or partnership or small business, you can tick the no box. It's not a problem because you don't pay tax or have withheld tax up front. So from now on, your tax is going to be effectively zero or maybe $100. I learned a long time ago, if you put zero income on your return, it attracts an audit. Now, believe it or not, even audits are voluntary, but it creates fear in people. So rather than attract an audit, just put $100. And what are your expenses? Nothing. How, if you look at the format of the name that's on the return, it says, please print in block letters. I'm sure your viewers are aware of all that. Print in block letters. You blockhead? No, not quite. But block letters means what? The legal entity, not the living being. So what does the legal entity earn? Well, how can it earn anything? It's dead. It's a fiction. So, but we put $100. And what are its expenses? Likewise, zero. How can something that's dead have an expense? So the net income is $100, and you'll pay no tax on that. But for PAYE and G, where you want to recover withheld tax, the key to getting your withheld tax returned is that you need to get your net income below 18,200, where that amount is not taxable. So you'll get a full refund. Now, having said that, in the early days, everybody got their tax back for the first few years. And then the tax office got onto it because thousands of people were doing it. We were teaching people all over the country through workshops. So they started doing audits on people, and that pretty much killed it because people didn't know how to deal with the tax office and their audits. Well, it's once you know, we have a webinar on holding position that teaches you precisely how to hold your position and deal with any issue. So we don't leave you out in limbo. But if you're successful, you'll get all of your withheld tax back. And a percentage these days, I don't know what the percentage is, but I don't think it's half. It might be 40%. Get their withheld tax back again. The rest get a letter saying, oh, you've made a mistake and we need to maybe do an audit, or we need you need to correct the amount you put on there. And then you have to learn how to deal with that. But with those who are non-PAYNG, you're out of the system very quickly. Now, if you've got a public entity, a company, for example, then it has to put returns in still. And there are ways of dealing with the company and you privately where you can take the energy out of the public realm through the company and siphon a lot of it into the private realm. And it makes it look like the company's just limping along, or your registered business is just limping along, just making enough to pay its expenses. And that way, what goes into the private realm is totally yours and you can create wealth with it. And if you know how to leverage, we have a leverage module as well, you can create wealth very fast. So that in a nutshell is the tax area. There is more to it, but I'm giving you a brief overview. But we do have a webinar solely on that area, as well as support documents, so we can show you how to use the documents and how to properly complete them and fill them and make sure you get your returns.
I was just wondering, Mark, if because I've spoken to some people who have been through your courses, and one guy in particular kind of stood out. I can't remember his name right now. Actually, I do have it here. But basically, what he was saying was that when he did his tax returns, he did it for 4 years, and it was no, I don't have his name. Sorry, I thought I did. But he's basically saying there that he did his individual tax returns using a method and received quite a substantial return. Directly after receiving his refund, he then went and did his 2021, 2020, and 2019 tax returns. And like you said, then they audited him. He just simply followed the system and he won. And he had a return from all those years in excess of $100,000. That's one of the ones that I actually spoke to. I just, for the life of me, I can't remember his name. But yeah, it's interesting. I guess it's like anything. You've got to follow everything. It's not a matter of just, this will be easy. I'll get the webinar and do it. You've got to study it first. And that's what he said he did. He said he actually studied it for 3 full months. He learnt it back to front, watched it over and over and over again. Otherwise, there's really no point doing it, in my opinion. It's like any course. If you don't know it, you're not going to pass.
Well, Mark, that success you just shared, I could repeat that probably 500 or 1,000 times with the people, and not just Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians, Americans, Englishmen, even from other European countries. They are all getting successes because we don't work with legislation much. Legislation is unique to a country. We work with rules of equity, which is universal. It's the law that prevails over all else. So we haven't got time to go into that here, but we certainly have a good foundational knowledge course, which I recommend. It's free and everyone should do that. It'll teach you what you really need to know. For those who don't know, I'm not saying there are some of you that probably do know, what the private and public realm are and what the effects are of presiding in one or other, what the obligations and duties or lack thereof is. But if we go to the next subject, because I'm just conscious, Mark, of the time factor, we look at councils, and councils are one of also the easiest organizations to deal with, believe it or not. I love councils. In 2017, I thought I'd test the waters that year. Instead of taking or cleaning them up in court, which I do, we don't get court orders. What we do is the court throws the cases out, and that way they don't get a judgment and we don't get a judgment, but it doesn't go back to court. So people who've had 670,000, 500,000, 370, 400, whatever fines from councils, they're gone. But I learned in 2017 we had 12 different meetings that year just with councils alone. And I've done tax ones, I've done banks, I've done government departments. It doesn't matter who they are. We have all the aces. So out of the 12 council meetings, we won all 12 of them. So that's not a bad innings. And the thing is, if you go prepared and you ask the right questions, I call them setup questions, which they refuse to answer because if they answer correctly, it'll incriminate themselves and they'll lose by default. And we win by default, and we win all the time by default. But the reason councils are easy is because they're not even legitimate. They're not legal. They claim to be councils, but these days they are all corporations with ABN numbers, and they act in the capacity of a council, but they are not a council. They are a corporation. And by definition, anyone that does business with the corporation, firstly, must be notified. There has to be full transparency going into a contract, which there isn't in this situation. And secondly, I've missed the mark. I'll come back to it. But, there were 2 referendums and 1 indirect referendum referring to councils. And in all 3 cases, 2/3 of the population in Australia elected not to have third tier of government. So even if they're a corporation, what the heck are they doing there? It's a fraud. And, defying the will of the people is still treason. So one of my setup questions is, do you know what the outcome of a charge of treason is? And you should see their eyes. They're terrified. I just tell them, well, you better do some research because councils shouldn't even exist. But anyway, if you've got an issue with council, we have 2 separate webinars and we have 2 separate modules. One is just dealing with council in general. A lot of people have trouble with neighbours, for example, fence lines, trees, outstanding issues. And the second webinar and support module is dealing specifically with rates. And rates is one of the biggest causes of people collapsing financially because they let a few years slip and they just can't catch up. And next thing they tack it on either to the mortgage or the council sells up the property. And I'm talking about Australia, but I'm sure it's happening universally as well. So it's totally illegal. But if you've got I didn't mention with the tax, if you've got an outstanding bill, then you have many ways of discharging it. And we have modules on all of those and webinars on all of those, but you can simply use a promissory note, bill of exchange, money order, or one that resolves very quickly is a method, a rule of thumb, paying 10% of the outstanding balance. The payment must be accompanied with a notice of payment offer where you disclose the repercussions of their actions. And because you were transparent with them and they performed, they deposited the check or money order or held it for longer than 72 hours after receiving it. Rules of equity, which is part of contract. There's a cooling off period under contract, as everyone should know. So once 72 hours gone, you've got a contract. There's no way out unless of consent by all parties. But you don't have to consent. So if they've still retained possession and not returned it, then they've accepted 10% in full and final satisfaction of the debt. That's and that has been tried and tested 4 times just with my group over 25 years in court, and the courts confirmed all 4 cases. So you can't lose. As long as you make an offer to pay and put the payment instrument with it, and they act on it in a favourable manner to you, then it's all over. So if I go to councils, let's say you've got rates outstanding, you can do exactly the same thing. You can use any one of 10 modes of payment. We have a webinar, 10 ways to discharge a debt. And then there are specific modules on individual payment mechanisms, but these mechanisms comply with federal legislation. There's at least 8 different federal acts that support that bills of exchange and promissory notes. Money order is subset of a bill of exchange, same as checks. They are all valid modes of payment. So when you use them, they can't come back and say, we don't accept that form of payment, which they do say, but a payment refused discharges the liability to pay the debt. If I had a $100 debt to my friend Mark here, and I said, Mark, here's $100, and Mark said, no, don't want it. Do I owe Mark the $100? No, because he's refused the payment. Similarly, if you give someone a promissory note and they refuse it, the liability to discharge the debt has been discharged against the maker, which is you, the payer and maker. So that's from the payment side. If you've got an issue with a council and they threaten court, which they very frequently do, just ring them up, get it solved as quickly as possible, because then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Just say, look, if there's an issue still, and whatever the issue is, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's an outstanding debt or whether it's a problem with the fence, I want this thing settled as fast as possible. I'd like to come in. I'd like to meet with the counsellor who presides over this jurisdiction of the Shire, and maybe have their lawyer or their legal representative with them, so that hopefully we can resolve this at the chamber in council. And they'll make a time, give you a time, you go there with a witness and you are well prepared. Don't go there half-cocked, because you'll lose. And don't make any claims. We've got a module on how to properly go to a meeting, a round table meeting, and knock their block off with your mouth. You know, it's fun. I tell you, once you know these strategies, you will become invincible. And I tell you, there's a lot of room out in the marketplace for people who are competent, because people want help and there's no one to go to. They come to us, but I'm only one man. That's why we've got a website, to try and help as many people as we can, rather than one person at a time. That's impossible, not when there's millions of people that need help. So when you go to the meeting, you ask the right questions and they default, they don't answer, and you ask them 3 times, rules of equity prevails, and they don't answer. You say, oh, so you agree with me? I don't have to change the fence line, or the payment that I made was accepted by you. Well, are we done? We done? And they'll say, well, I guess so. You know, it's just all over, Red Rover. You can also settle matters in writing. We call it a private administrative process, where you send the council a notice, 3 successive notices at usually 14 days apart. You can make it shorter or longer. That's up to you, but be consistent. A notice and demand for further and better particulars, for instance, where you say, look, I want to comply. I'm prepared to comply with what you want. I just need to know what my obligations and duties are to the council. If any, start raising doubt, if any. And what I need to see is blah. And those documents are all online as well. And we go through them on the webinars. And then if people need, the documents, they can get it through the shop area, the module area. So when we ask them to provide evidence that they have jurisdiction authority, they're not illegal, they're blah, 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 and they will not answer the letter because it would incriminate them, then we send them a default letter, a default notice, asking the very same questions and letting them know that they defaulted. That was the first commercial default when they failed to answer the first notice. So we give them a second opportunity. And when they don't answer that, we send them a third and final notice, demand notice, and notice of default judgment, which is essentially if they don't answer the third notice, then they're agreeing to the following stipulations. They had no jurisdiction. There is no debt owing. The fence doesn't have to be moved, whatever it is. And you have an agreement in place, and the courts will uphold the private agreement. It's essentially a private default judgment. So all you have to do is, if it was in court, and hopefully it never goes to court, it shouldn't if you've done it properly, or competently, I should say, then the matter's resolved. If it went to court and you had to put a defence in, well, with your affidavit, you exhibit all your notices, and you can say to His Honour, Your Honour, I don't know why they took it to court. The matter's already solved administratively. Here's the paperwork. Could you have a look through it? And then the judge will look at them and say, well, what have you to say? It looks like did you answer any of these? And they'll say, you didn't answer them. Well, why have you brought it to my court? Bang, smack them out. So we have all the aces and the power. We just need to learn how to use it. And that's what we teach. I focus on it. I should be really a teacher, but I'm a mediator. So do we have any questions from anybody in those areas?
If you've got some questions, just jot them down in the chat box. If you click chat on the bottom of your screen, it'll open up the chat box. You can just jot some questions down in there. One of the things, Mark, you mentioned about promissory notes was, say, getting rid of a tax bill. There's a number of people I know that have tried that, but they've failed at it. And I only know one, when I say I know some people, it's about 6 or 7 of them. Only one of them succeeded. And it was a case of the same thing as always. It's always the same thing. Is he was the only one that actually went through and learnt the process properly before just picking it up willy-nilly and jumping in there. So I'm sure you'll agree that's probably what you'd have to do. So questions come in here. I know. Can you see the questions, Mark? I'll read them out to you.
I've had a number of wins with tax for people, but the best couple, one was for 32 million. I guess it's because of the size of it.
Absolutely.
But another one was down in Victoria, was for $250,000 too. And that was going to the Supreme Court, and we had a meeting with the head of the legal department of the tax office, the top dog lawyer with 2 sidekicks, and in 45 minutes we had a meeting out of our hands, and it never went to court.
Yeah.
So it just shows you, but you've really got to know your stuff. You can't just do the paperwork and send it off and expect that it'll get settled. A percentage might, but most don't. But when you learn to hold your position and competently, you'll win every time. That's where the magic comes in. There's no silver bullets. It's called work. It's not a lot of work. It's not 12 years at school going from, grade 1 to grade 12. It's not 12 years. It's maybe 1 year of intense study, an hour a night or something, and to become a Superman and to create wealth and become invisible and deal with things. Man, I'd rather have replaced school with what I teach. I'll look for the questions.
That's right. Before we get into the questions, one of the things I did promise was that we're going to have something special for you guys tonight. If you want it, it'll take about probably 6 or 7 minutes to go through, and then we'll do the Q&A after that. So I might just present that special offer that you had there, Mark.
Yeah.
Just bear with me. I might just share my screen on this. It'll take us a couple of minutes to get through it. Then what I'll do is we'll come in with the Q&As because there's a couple of really good questions in there I can see already. Just bear with me. So I'll just share my screen. So here with Mark, obviously we're learning to master the art of freedom. It's not something you learn overnight. It's something that takes a little bit of time. But if you don't do it, where are you going to get stuck on? And people already these days are getting caught on simple things like parking fines and council rates. So this is for new members only. And obviously Mark being the founder of Solutions Empowerment, been a good fight for over 30 years. I want to offer you a free membership for 12 months. So 12 full months of free membership to the Solutions Empowerment Network. And that includes also free training and the Q&As with Mark once every second week, where you can come on if you're stuck with something, you've been through a module to try and learn it, and you're just stuck on, let's just say, council rate, what to do. And you say, look, Mark, here's what I've done so far. Where am I going wrong? And he helps you out with that. Plus, you're going to show you how, if you decide this is something for you, what we're about to offer you tonight, we're also going to give you a free holiday as an incentive to come on board with us for 2 adults and 2 children at a 4-star hotel valued at around $1,000. And you've got destinations to choose from pretty much all around the world. And there's quite a few destinations here in Australia to choose from as well. The most popular modules, this is what it's really all about. The problem with you come onto the membership and get the free training and all that, but people always need more. You need some extra help, and that's what the modules are for. So they're sold separately, and they're only available to members at what we call a discounted or wholesale rate. So you'll find that they're actually quite inexpensive. However, we wanted to combine some together here to make it worth your while if this is something you'd like to come on board with. So starting from number one of the most popular modules is how to transition from the public to the private. Now, this module teaches you how to transition from the public realm, where you're subject to legislation, to where you're protected and not subject to legislation. The next one is minimizing tax, and it's probably the biggest one of all. It's how to legitimately and lawfully keep all that you earn. Module 3 that's also included is asset protection using trusts. You're going to learn how the key vehicle can be used to protect the estate and assets from all potential theft, and let's call them pirates in this case, and how you can utilize it for wealth generation also. Number 4 is how to hold your position when talking with authorities. It's quite important that you do this the right way, otherwise they just walk all over you. So this module teaches you how to firmly draw a line that they can't get past, so you get a matter settled even if you're timid in a room full of bigwigs with their perceived authority, because we all know what that's like if you've been to court. Next one is leverage. This is quite a popular one, and it's a module that teaches you how to create a lot from very little capital or resources and people and connections, other people's money and time to ultimately maximize your return. So how to utilize time as well. The next one in there is the cash flow versus living costs. This is where a lot of people come unstuck, because most people will never achieve financial independence due to their cost of living is typically the same as what they earn or their cash flow. So I'm going to show you in this module, learn how to be more frugal and create a surplus every month. The court role play is a really good one. At some point, we're going to find you're going to end up in court with something, and if you're like me, probably multiple times. And if you don't do the right thing, they're going to walk all over you. So this module reveals how to maneuver in court and achieve a settlement in your favor. The next one is how to address police. People that are learning a lot of this free movement sort of thing, or whatever you want to call it, they're going in half-cocked and they're not going in with the right ammunition. You can't just go in and say, well, I'm a free man on the land. It just doesn't work, and they don't buy it. And they're on the scout for people like that, and they want to harm you. So the best way to address police, it goes through a process on how to be courteous, honourable and respectful, and to settle with them so they just leave you alone. The other module that's included is the claim of rights. This teaches you how to use your public expression to assert your correct political status and all the rights affiliated. Very important that you go for that, and that's a lot of understanding there, especially if you're new. It will help. Next one is addressing the council. Mark spoke a little bit about this tonight. It shows you how to settle any outstanding issue with a council. The next one that's included is the roundtable meetings and settle matters. This really goes hand in hand with a lot of things, including addressing the council. Reveals how to establish a meeting with any party that you have, say, an outstanding account with or a debt with, and how to settle that matter before you leave the room. So you're not waiting for them to send you something out in the mail to confirm it. It's settled when you leave the room. Next one is stop paying road tolls. I'm sure we'd all love to know how to do that. This is a clear-cut process that exempts you from paying road tolls. The next one is property protection, the secrets to protecting your property so that if you're ever sued, no one can take your home. Getting towards the end now, also is included is a setup question module. So here's where you'll learn the key questions to ask when someone has got a claim against you, where if they fail to provide evidence, they default to a loss situation and you to a win. You just got to know where that is and how to identify it and what to do next. The second last one that's included is language to use and not to use. So there are key words that are antagonistic towards the private realm when you're in the private realm, or you as a man or woman. And there are keywords that are favorable to your political status as a man or woman, but can't be used by the political realm. So that's a really good module to learn. And the last one that's included is to obtain your source ID. Now, this is a simple process to acquire the document that perhaps your mum completed when you were born in her own handwriting that's not recognised by the state, but makes you exempt from obligations and liabilities of the public realm of the corporations. That's everything that we're going to include for you. And if you were to go out in the real world, let's be realistic here, ladies and gentlemen. If you go out in the real world and obtain this kind of help from solicitors, we call solicitors, we ask questions, wanted to find out what would they charge for trying to include this sort of stuff. And we had some interesting debates over that. But basically, the smallest one we found was a small firm of a one-man operator for $49,000. Most of them were over $100,000. So there's some real costs there. Now, for members to learn this at the wholesale rates and buy these modules separately, they're just over $2,000. But we want to make them available to you tonight for a fraction of that cost, literally. Plus, we want to give you a couple of extra very special gifts as well that you're going to find probably a little bit hard to believe, but when you realize that they're authentic and they're real, you're going to absolutely love them. So the first, I guess, bonus that we want to give you is we do want to give you a 12 months, like a full year, 12 months membership with Solutions Empowerment. So you do access everything in the members area, including the free training courses with hours and hours of content material. Plus, the most important one to me, I think, is the live Zoom meetings once every 2 weeks, with Mark directly, where you can join for free, ask any question you like with something that you're stuck on. So, I strongly suggest is don't just come in and say, look, I want the solution. Learn it, go through one of the modules, purchase one of the modules, or if it's one of the modules included here, try and get through it and learn it and bring your questions based on that. There's not a course anywhere in the world where you can go and do a course, not actually do the course, and then come to a Q&A or ask the teacher, well, how do I do this? He's going to say, well, go back to the course and learn it first. So I hope that makes sense. But you do get access for 12 full months, and that's a saving of $129. The second bonus I want to give is a $200 certificate. The reason that's there is because at some point you are going to want to have a non-registered trust set up of some sort. And this gives you $200 off that price. So you keep that handy. The third one is the free holiday. A lot of people have asked me, can we just get the holiday? So the free holiday accommodation reward is valued at around $1,000 on average. Some places, depending on your destination, a little bit less than that, and some are right up to $1,500, but most of them are around $1,000. It is for 2 adults and 2 children at a 4-star hotel for a minimum of 3 nights and 4 days. Some of the places in Phuket and places like that, Fiji, they can be up to 7 nights and 8 days. And there are destinations all around the world to choose from. The only thing you need to do is cover the booking, the cleaning fee, and you've got to get yourself there to and from. So I hope that makes sense. So yes, they are legitimate. There's no timeshare. I saw a question in the chat there. Does this include one of those timeshare things? No, it is not. You do not go to any timeshare meetings. Good question though. And there's destinations everywhere. They're all over Australia. They're all over New Zealand. They're all in Fiji, Thailand. And just recently, a couple of months ago, we started having some destinations also available in the United States of America. I think they're at this stage almost in every single state, or I don't know, they call it county or something over there. Anyway, you know what I mean. So what's included? A quick brief overview. You get full access to the 16 modules valued at over $2,000. 1 year full membership valued at $129. A free holiday accommodation certificate valued at $1,000. And the private trust voucher valued at $200. So the total value there is a little over $3,300. I'm not going to try and build it up. For you to come on board, all that is just $599 Australian. That's it, a one-time fee. And you get all of that included. The link that you can get that from, and if there should be, it depends where you're watching this. If it's on a YouTube channel or something, it'll be in the description. This is the link, or there might be a button, or the link will be underneath this video if you're watching it from a landing page somewhere, because we're going to be showing this to people running the replay for everyone. Many members experience this though, and this is what we've heard a lot from members. Before finding Solutions Empowerment, they've said that when they had a problem with the government department of some sort, they couldn't sleep. They felt stressed, anxious, and afraid of what the government would do to them and their family. But now they have armed themselves with the right information. They've studied it and they've learned it. They can actually go through all the smoke screens and all the mirrors, and they feel more confident that they have a plan to deal with these issues. And I've seen this happen a lot. So the other thing is it's real help for everyone. Helping people since, nearly 30 years now, Mark, I think have been doing this. So what are others saying about this? And these are real honest testimonials. So Aaron is an interesting one, dealt with the tax department. He said he submitted his 2022 tax returns for individuals using your methods, using Mark's methods, and received a substantial refund. Directly after receiving the refund, he said he submitted amendments for his now these are amendments to his 2021, 2020, and 2019 tax returns. They audited him then, which is a common thing. Once they see that you're doing this, they try and scare you by auditing you. But if you know your stuff, you don't need to be scared of that. So they audited him, and he was set back a little bit, back and forth, but ultimately he won, and the total refund to date is over $100,000. Camille, she discharged a company car using the PN method, and even managed to discharge a $47,000 debt of company debt. The next one she said she's going to take on is the ATO, and I spoke to these people directly. And Ron, initially, he settled a $7,000 credit card with ANZ. Ron's actually teaching some of this stuff now. This is what we hope that people will do. You get so good at it that you start teaching others. This is what we want. So $7,000 credit card was discharged with the ANZ Bank. Took a couple of weeks. Secondly, Centrelink said that they overpaid him $10,000 and he would have to pay it back. So with a little back and forth, he managed to settle that as well. In both cases, he settled completely with nothing owed. So, and there's a lot of testimonials like this. So real people that are out there doing it. But please, like these guys, they went in and studied it. I spoke with Aaron over the phone for about probably 45 minutes. And he told me, he said, look, I spent 3 months learning this before I took them on. 3 months for $100,000, pretty good effort if you ask me. Now, there's real support here. If for any reason, well, first of all, the Training and Education Course Plus is twice every month with the live Zoom call. So that's real support that once you're on board and you're a member for a whole year, you've got support. And if you decide you want to renew that membership at the end of the year, it's just $99. So it's not an expensive thing. Mark's purposefully made it very affordable for everyone. And if you get stuck with anything at any time and it's outside of those hours, just send an email to Mark and the team. He's got a small team there and they will come back to you. But the best thing is, honestly, go to the live sessions. Much better that way. So the whole thing is just $599. It will end soon, so it's not going to be around forever. And that's the link. And like I said, if you're watching this on a web page somewhere, there'll be a link underneath these videos somewhere. If you're watching it on YouTube, there will be a link in the description somewhere. So if this is something that's not out of your budget, and you can comfortably afford it, you can see the value in it, jump on board and grab this. You're going to save yourself over $2,700, plus you're going to get that free holiday as well. And you've got 18 months to use that. So once you go in there, you do, like I said, you do have to pay the cleaning fee and the booking fee, and obviously your travel to and from the destination. But once you've got that, you choose your destination and you pay that cleaning and booking fee. You've got like 18 months to use it. So if this is something you're looking at thinking, you know what, I think I might grab this, do it before it's gone, because it won't be around forever. I'll just stop sharing here. But what we will do now is we will come in and answer some of the questions that are here. I've got a couple more people joining. I'll just look them in. So the first question here, Mark, is how can I prove in court? Actually, and while you're answering that, I will put a link in the chat for everyone to that discount. So how can I prove in court that the federal, state, and local governments are fraudulent? Our CAP's name is in a trust and owned by these criminals.
How can you prove?
How can you prove in court that the federal, state? Sorry, how can I prove in court that the federal,
State
and local governments are fraudulent?
Well, that is a really deep rabbit warren to go down. So I'm going to be very, very brief. The federal government is a scam on many levels. I believe the first is that there's no valid constitution. Even the 1900 and 1901 is a fraud, because only, I think 11% of the population, it might have been less, it might have been 7%, voted on it. So how does it apply to everybody else? And how does it apply to everybody born after that event? It's a complete sham. The second event is the 1908, where the American White Fleet came into Sydney and took possession of Australia. That's not taught anywhere. The next event was 1919, after the First World War, when Billy Hughes was at Versailles and arguing that Australia needed to be an independent nation. And they eventually were granted that, but it's not an independent nation because we still have British law operating here, and therefore, how can it be sovereign? So it's another scam. So there are other things in the 1940s, and there are so many reasons why the federal government is a shambles and a scam. State government only follows suit because the state government was created, or the state was created out of the federal constitution, so it automatically is a scam. And councils, why would they have referendums on whether we wanted a third tier of government in 1974, 1988, and indirectly 1999? And all occasions people said no, 2/3 said no, we don't want third tier of government. And yet, hello, we have these corporations here posing as councils, which is a scam and a fraud, and is actually treason, because they've defied the expressed will of the Australian electorate. So all three tiers, it was a bit longer than what I wanted to do, but it's a really deep rabbit warren that whoever asked that one has asked. It's not a 5-second explanation.
I get it. So it's probably a matter of learning this and actually taking that in when you're in the courtroom. And I guess asking, is it not true that, and then pointing those things out.
Yep.
Someone's asked any remedy for fire ants property trespassing and the use of poison for us and environment. So yeah, they're obviously coming in saying they want to treat it for fire ants, and we want to spray this deadly poison around on your land.
Well, first of all, which state is the party in?
Elizabeth, if you could just let us know what state you're in, just type that in for us in the chat.
Yeah, I can't see the questions.
That's all right. I can see them here. New South Wales.
Okay, so your property is held in Torrens title where you have literally no rights over your property. So it's a little bit tricky. Any lawyer, almost every lawyer will say, "Oh, yes," but in the Torrens title, what do you call it? Classification. You have it holds fee simple within the Torrens title classification, but how can a lesser classification hold an enlarged classification? Fee simple means the owner has exclusive. Now look up what the legal definition of exclusive means. Exclusive rights to use and possession of the property. Queensland has fee simple, and some other states may still have a component of their titles in fee simple, but they're being switched over as we speak. When properties come on the market for sale, that's the time the titles office does a shifty and sticks it into Torrens title, where you lose all your rights. But if everyone can learn that when you buy property, make sure that you have ID with your all rights reserved on it, license, debit cards, credit cards, passport, whatever, so that when you sign your purchase contract for the property, you also sign with all rights reserved. Because if you don't, and you just do it on the contract, then the lawyer will say, "Is that your usual signature?" And he'll ask for she or he will ask for evidence, and you haven't got it, and then they'll rip up the contract, and you have to sign another one. So if you can present there and then your evidence that that's how you sign on a regular basis, then they'll let it through, like they did with my property here in New South Wales. So by putting all rights reserved, you have just annulled all the benefits and privileges of that contract, and you've reserved all the rights in its entirety. So the property essentially is fee simple. I can do what I like on the property. But, here in New South, the contracts are about 55, 60 pages, most of it listing all the different state acts that you're subject to. Well, I'm not subject to any state acts. Well, my property is not subject to any of them. They got kicked out the window. So that's about all you could do. But you can test them, Elizabeth, by just saying, "Look, I don't consent to chemicals on this property. It's a clean property." You might want to see if you can get certification of chemical-free status on the property, and that they would be trespassing that, and you can sue them for it. That's about probably the best you can do, unless you've signed it with all the contract with all rights reserved.
I just hate the fact sometimes, Mark. It's like you're back in high school and you're the guy that gets picked on all the time. There's 6 guys calling in the room after school, and you say, "You know what you're doing is wrong." And they're like, "Yeah, I know, but we're big and you're small." And it pisses, sorry for saying, but it pisses me off.
Yeah, sure.
It's a similar sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a good example. The gangster mentality, which the government is. They are the biggest gangster of all, but they're not so brutal. When you express your non-consent, because consent is part of the is an element of contract. If you didn't consent, there's no contract. You can't contract unless there's a gun behind your head, and that's they're easily voided, as long as you've got a party to go to. But governments, if you express you don't consent to something, they can't force their will on you unless you've somewhere agreed in the past to their authority, and that possibly can be. If for example, and this happens all the time, you get approached by someone in supposed authority in the public realm, might be a police officer, might be a judge, might be the sheriff. They go, "Oh, are you such and such? Are you John Henry?" And you go, "Yeah." And the offer was, there's offer and consent. Is that part of agreement or contract? Absolutely. The offer was, "Are you this party?" And you say yes. So you've accepted the offer. So now there's an agreement. Now you're subject to legislation. You're buggered. What should you have said? Well, either who are you or I answer to that name. But that differentiates between being the name. You know, if you said, yeah, that's me, bang, you're gone. If you said, I answer to that name and many others, I think the first one was, it's a boy. That's supposed to be funny, but sorry, I don't get a laugh anymore. It's a stale one. But, you know, I've been called dickhead. I've been called lots of things in my life, but I do answer to that name too, when out of necessity or when it's necessary. That differentiates, and they don't have jurisdiction or authority over you. They have to get you to incriminate yourself. There's legislation that prohibits people from incriminating themselves, but they don't know that they're incriminating themselves. See, knowledge is, you know, what do they say? Ignorance is bliss. Mate, ignorance is fatal. I think it's a government propaganda slogan.
Oh, they love it. That's why they're trying to dumb us down. Another question here, I already know the answer because I've got a non-registered trust, is would a non-registered trust be able to open a bank account?
Oh, yes, it does. The public recognises our product because the trustee and the settler are registered parties, but the trust itself is not registered. And therefore, anything affixed to a registered entity might be able to be seen. That's how I see it with the public realm. They recognise our product and it can do whatever business that a company can do. In most scenarios, not all. For example, New South Wales in about the last 3 years refuses to allow cars to be registered in a non-registered trust now.
But I think where they're having trouble, Mark, is the private foundations. I know Ron tried, or he had a bank knock him back just last week. So, and they're the ones having trouble. Yeah, the private trust, the non-registered trusts at the moment, still pretty good. You never know what they're going to sling on us. There's a comment here that they changed fee simple into in fee simple.
Yeah,
with the new title deeds.
Yeah, apparently a subtle difference. And I did read about that. I just can't recall what it was off the cuff, but yeah, it was a subtle difference. But, you know, I think if people are wise, they will change their signatures to include the words all rights reserved, touching their actual signature. We've got to do whatever it takes to protect what we have, because the gangsters want to enforce slavery upon us, and they must have our consent to do it, and they know it.
A good question. You already know the answer because I've done this myself, and you're going to be happy. When discharging a loan with this process, does it affect your credit ratings if one requires credit later? Also, when placing a property, actually, we'll answer that one first. No. So when discharging a loan, does it affect your credit rating?
No.
But that bank, let's say it was the NAB bank, they probably won't lend me that money again. Just that one institution.
They might let 12 months pass and
Yeah.
come back with a new offer for credit or whatever.
Yeah, and that's happened too. Yeah. But if you're looking for something pretty quick after you discharge it, probably not straight away. So the second question was, when placing a property in your trust, how can we avoid the stamp duty? That's been a big question. That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's not an easy one because the Office of State Revenue is the gatekeeper. And if you don't pay the blood money, then they might not let the settlement go through. So I often say, look, pick your battles. You don't want extra expenses incurred just because of late settlement. Sometimes it might be just better to pay for the time being and maybe get it back in another manner elsewhere. I mean, you can try and hold your position and so forth, and it might go over the settlement date, and maybe ultimately you'll be successful. But I haven't had to do that yet. I haven't had the opportunity to do it yet, I should say, because we were under court order to be out of a rental property, and there was nothing available, and this property came up, and we got on here one day before, onto this property a day before we were, by court order, supposed to be out of the unit, so we complied. So I didn't want anything holding up the settlement.
Mm. I'm not sure what the question is. How about debt collectors? If you can just type in there what your actual question is. How debt collectors, please. And you mean how do you deal with debt collectors? Is that your question? If you can just type that in there for us, Elizabeth. But can they take you to court? I think that would depend on the amount, wouldn't it, Mark?
Look, it's not warranted. It'll cost them thousands to do it. It's just not worth it.
What about if it was a $250,000 loan?
It could go to a tribunal, but
Do you use the round table method?
oh, you could, yeah, you could.
We don't have. I know it's easy. She just said we don't have any contract with them with a debt collection. No, you don't, and that's true. And that's a card I've played a few times, but I don't say it that way because they don't know any better, and they're just going to come back and say, "Well, it doesn't matter. We bought the debt." Oh, thank you. You know, and I know quite a few people have tried that, and that is correct. But what's your take on that, Mark?
What idiot buys a debt? You know, you got to be mad. The thing is, it's correct. In your contracts, it often says that, you know, the other party reserves the right to sell the debt to a third party. But when I was in court, when that was brought up by the bank, and they said exactly that, yeah, but it said you signed the contract where it said we could sell it. And I said, Your Honor, I think he's right. And the judge had a big smile then, you know, because I wanted to trap them, the buggers. That's how I work. I trap them. Anyway, I said, but could someone point out precisely where it says that I agreed that they could come and recover the debt from me? Because I can't find it. I've been looking and looking, but I can't find it. And then the room's silent. Oh, so no one could find it. So you agree that they didn't have the right to go and recover the debt from me. They needed my consent. Well, I don't consent. Bang, all over Red Rover.
So just joined as a member about a month ago. Very new. I challenged the fine about 3 months until they said they would cancel my rego and license. So I paid it. Yeah, they've threatened you. How do we avoid this again? I guess I don't know what you did, but you know, comment on that.
Well, one of my rules of thumb is I don't have my rego in the state that I live in. That way they can't cancel it. But since you have rego in the state that you don't have a lot of options, instead of making the whole payment, you could do a part payment and either draw it out, or after the first payment, then you can use another instrument to wipe the rest of it out and see if you get successful with that one. But remember that your license could potentially be an essential service, and they cannot prohibit you from an essential service. It's illegal. If you need your license to travel so you can buy food and, you know, whatever to live, then it's an essential service, particularly if there's no public transport around you, which is
I think I think like what you're saying before, it's not just a matter of hearing a couple of things here, going and doing it. It's spending a bit of time and learning it first. There's a few things you probably need to go through and read over. I got sent a double fine for driving without a rego, even though I was a week out, but I didn't see the reminder letter. It's now $1,800 instead of the original $1,000.
Wow. Well, you could write in and humbly apologize as an oversight and just state that you didn't see any reminder notice or even a first notice that it actually, was it a license? Because I don't think you get notified if your license expires. But anyway, you could write in and just state that you didn't receive any notification that it had expired, and that it was an oversight, and that you have a pretty clean record overall. And it would be great if on this occasion that you could waive the fine, or at least keep it to the standard fee. And, you know, basically it's a renegotiation, and often they do.
Yeah, so I spoke to them. They just and I told them that, but they just said no. I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, you either pay or time pay or tell them to take it through court. I did that with one of my infringements 2 years ago from Sydney when I went in there. Drove in at night and cars were creeping along, doing about a snail pace in 4 lanes, and I was in the wrong lane. So I indicated, crossed over. Next thing I got pulled over. You crossed the line. I said, yeah. Well, that's illegal. I said, where does it say that? I said, I've never been to Sydney by car. I always fly in, but this is the first time I came in and there's chock-a-block everywhere. There's no danger. The people behind me allowed me in. Anyway, they ignored it, threw the infringement in the car. So I elected court, and but I haven't got the time to go to Sydney. So I haven't made a pleading in many, many years, but I thought this should be an easy one. I could just put not guilty and then put an affidavit in explaining what had occurred and that I had a good record. Anyway, when I rang the court and said, look, can we have a Zoom meeting or whatever, because it's a long way, they said, oh, only if you plead guilty. Yeah, talk about coaxing for a decision. And I thought, yeah, I'm gonna beat them. So I didn't have a Zoom meeting. I just changed the pleading online to guilty with mitigating circumstances and sent the same affidavit. Basic, I'm out of town, didn't know. Common law says that you can't be guilty if you were unaware of the offences. Then that, because there's no intent. You need intent to be convicted of a felony or a criminal offence under the common law, but there was no intent. Anyway, my mitigating circumstances was that I didn't know and there was no intent. So they brought the case forward. Anyway, it was heard, and I didn't hear from the court. So a month later, after they told me when it would be heard, I rang the court and they said, oh, they accepted your plea of guilty, by the way. I said, oh, guilty with mitigating circumstances, right? And what's the outcome? They said, oh, they withdrew the fine. I said, they accepted the pleading, but they withdrew the fine. They said, that's right. Yeah, it's finished. You don't have to worry about it. I said, okay, thank you. Bang.
Crazy.
So I learned something on that process. But normally, if you've got a proceeding, if you play the non-consent game, it'll just be thrown out of court. There won't, because you have to consent to participate. So if you don't consent to participate, then they can't proceed. They do it very colorably, but that's how it goes.
Can you identify as not guilty these days? That's the new thing, is identify as a cat as something else. Identify as not guilty.
Maybe in this country, but not in America anymore. Only male and female. Mark,
by default, it's saying by default you have a driver's license, so you're agreeing to you are agreeing, right?
Not necessarily. Where's the evidence that I was operating under the license at the time of the alleged offence?
With things like this.
I've got a webinar in a few minutes to do.
All right, well, let's wrap it up. Just in case, I'll quickly pop that link down there again. We'll keep that open for the next couple of days. And someone asked me a question there about couldn't get into one of these. Just give me a buzz tomorrow. I sent you a private message with my phone number there. And thanks for coming tonight, guys. And we'll send out some reminders. We've recorded this. So I'll send that out to everyone to watch again as well. And we'll finish up tonight. Thanks, Mark, for joining us and making some time for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Great question.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.
Bye.